Metabolic pathways, they're just a series of chemical reactions in your cells that release energy, and then they harness that energy into ATP. So pathways can be thought of in many ways. Is oxygen required? Where does the reaction happen? What are the reactants? What are the products, right? We've thoroughly discussed cellular respiration in this module, but fermentation, which is happening in these barrels here, well, in the vats, fermentation is a pathway of making ATP important to many organisms. Fermentation is sometimes called anaerobic respiration in that no oxygen is required for the process to happen. So you can imagine that some mud-dwelling bacteria can do this to make ATP if no oxygen is present. This process begins much like glycolysis, the first step of cellular respiration. And it happens in the cytoplasm with enzymes, but what it produces is very different. The first type of fermentation that we discuss is lactic acid fermentation, which can be done by your own muscle cells. Have you ever worked a double shift? Yeah. Yep, and you don't really eat enough between the shifts, right? Especially if you're a waitress and you've been serving food the whole time, you don't want anything to do with it between shifts. And then halfway through the second shift, you just hit the wall. I mean, that's what we call it, right? Hitting the wall. You are demanding so much ATP from your muscles, and they just can't make it happen with the glucose that's available. Long story short, machinery in the cell gets confused and ATP is made, but through this pathway that looks like glycolysis with like a bad ending. Recognize the glucose breaking down here in the diagram to the right, and it breaks down into pyruvate, makes a little bit of ATP and NADH, or electron taxi. Both of those are being made in the process. However, an additional step uses and recycles our NADH instead of sending it to the mitochondria. And we end up with these two lactate molecules, which convert to lactic acid, which is acidic. Lactic acid, although it can denature muscle proteins, it can also denature lots of other yummy foods to make things like pickles, kimchi, root beer, sour cream, yogurt, beer, champagne, you name it. And as humans, we usually harness the bacteria to do this type of fermentation, right? But we can also use fungus as well. I want to take a moment to introduce an organism called yeast. It's actually a fungus, and although there's a big misconception that it's a bacteria, its Latin or scientific name is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. As a fungus, this organism is eukaryotic, and it's got a complex cell with organelles. If you buy dried yeast in a packet, once you give it some sugar, water, a little bit of warmth, it'll start to reproduce, which is called budding, and you can see the budding in the yeast here in the microscopic picture on the left. As the yeast buds or grows, it does cellular respiration and it emits carbon dioxide, which then forms the holes in the bread as it rises. Yeast is what we know as a facultative anaerobe. The word facultative means sometimes. It's like an on again, off again relationship. Oh, sometimes. Do you know a couple like that? Or are you a couple like that? I know a couple people like that. Anyway, a facultative anaerobe can use oxygen when O2 is present for cellular respiration. And when doing that, it makes carbon dioxide as a product, which we see here in this nice bread that's rising. When oxygen is absent, yeast can do fermentation, which produces alcohol in this case, not lactic acid. The first thing students do when they see this slide is they usually click back to look at the other slide of fermentation where lactate is produced. It's very similar, isn't it? Yeah, we have the breakdown of glucose to pyruvate with the production of ATP and NADH in the process, right? That's the same. We also have that second step there where NADH is used and recycled back to the first step, but this time carbon dioxide is released as a waste product. Instead of lactate, we're left with ethanol or alcohol. So we'd have an alcoholic, bubbly liquid, usually called beer, wine, champagne, hard cider, or any of those new varieties of alcoholic beverages I see coming out these days. It's a very interesting industry wine and beer has become. But in a sense, yes, alcohol is, it basically is the pee or the waste product of yeast. Take a moment here to review the biological molecules from Module 3. Remember that your body will break down carbs first. They're very simple and easy to break down, but they also only have 4 calories per gram. Lipids, or fats, have more than twice that at 9 calories per gram, and they're great storage molecules, like on this fat little bird here ready to fly south for the winter. Well, actually, it kind of looks like from the snow that he might have missed his chance, but he did stock up on the lightest and most densely packed energy molecules as he could, lipids. We have proteins that are those complex molecules that carry, like carbs, 4 calories per gram, but proteins, they have an incredible variety of uses in the human body, as we previously discussed. And then we have our nucleic acids, which impart no energy, but we use them to make our own DNA when we're replicating cells. So I'm not going to leave them out and include them there. But what is this? This brings us all to this map of cellular respiration along the bottom here. And we've got our 3 significant groups of biological molecules listed up top. So check out how each group enters into the cellular respiration pathway. We've been talking about glucose entering at the first step of glycolysis, but that's just an example. You can see that in reality, lipids and proteins, they enter at other points in the pathway. Say that you ingest those triglycerides when you eat peanuts, which you do. The triglycerides, they're broken up, the glycerol head from the 3 fatty acid tails, and the glycerol head is converted to be able to enter into glycolysis, while the fatty acid tails, they enter into the citric acid cycle. Check out the many pathways of proteins and the remaining amino groups that are needed to make your own proteins in anabolism. This is essentially a question of what foods you're eating and where they enter the process. Your body may want foods to enter at a certain point for efficiency. Are you giving your body those foods? I don't know. It's hard to know. Diet is so complex, and it's very difficult to listen to which foods are the best for you. Tracking is a great way to find out. Although time-consuming at first, many people find that the act of tracking their diet and energy levels is an easy way to see what does and doesn't work for their body and their pathway.